What if the miracle you've been praying for didn't come with bright lights, but with a Navy SEAL, a loyal war dog, and a one-legged woman fighting to survive a storm she was never meant to face? This is a story about danger, faith, and the quiet ways God sends help. Sometimes through the hands of strangers, sometimes through the devotion of a dog, and sometimes through the courage hidden inside ourselves. If you believe miracles still happen, stay with us until the end. And don't forget to subscribe, because every
Snow
week
swallowed
the
the
Ridgepoint
Ridgepoint
Mountains
stories
under
of
a
hope,
roaring white
healing,
veil,
and
the cold
God's
hammered the
protection.
land so violently that even the tallest pines bent like wounded soldiers surrendering to the storm. Inside the old but sturdy pickup truck crawling up the mountain road, Logan Ward tightened his grip on the steering wheel, feeling the vibration of the tires struggling against the icy terrain. Logan, a 33-year-old Navy serviceman, with the carved build of someone who had spent half his life in training grounds and battlefields, kept his posture firmly aligned, shoulders squared, jaw set. His body was large and powerful, with thick forearms, broad shoulders, and a torso that carried years of combat conditioning. His short black hair brushed lightly against his forehead each time the truck jolted, and faint stubble darkened his angular jawline. His skin bore the bronze undertone of a man who had lived under harsh suns and unforgiving conditions, and his slate-gray eyes reflected both vigilance and exhaustion. Those eyes had seen too much: ambushes, lost teammates, and the cost of decisions made in seconds, but he carried it all with a soldier's discipline. His expression as he drove was calm, controlled, but beneath it simmered a loneliness he rarely let surface. Beside him, curled with disciplined stiffness, lay Shadow, his 5-year-old German shepherd trained for special operations. Shadow's coat was a mixture of deep black and warm tan, thick enough to withstand cold but sleek from constant conditioning. His ears were triangular and sharp, standing at attention as he scanned the world beyond the frosted windows. Shadow was more than just a dog. He was a partner forged through fire, through missions no civilian story could fully capture. He carried small scars along his hind leg, remnants of shrapnel from an operation overseas. Despite the harsh training, he held a noble, calm presence, displaying intelligence in his amber eyes and unwavering loyalty in every breath. Logan often said that Shadow had saved his life more times than he had saved Shadow's, and tonight, something about the storm sharpened the dog's instincts. The wind screamed like a warning from the mountains themselves. Logan leaned forward, scanning the barely visible road. The headlights cut only a shallow path into the swirling snow. Ridgepoint was a treacherous place, even in calm seasons, but Logan preferred the solitude. It gave him space to confront the memories that chased him like shadows, the guilt that stalked him long after the missions ended. He had taken this leave to rest, or that's what he told his commanding officer. But truthfully, Logan had simply needed to breathe somewhere the world wasn't asking him to save it. Shadow lifted his head suddenly, ears rising in perfect synchronized alert. Logan felt a shift in the air, a tension that traveled from the dog's spine straight into his own nerves. "What is it, boy?" he murmured, his voice deep and steady. Shadow stared forward, tail stiff, body coiled, then gave a sharp, low bark. Logan instinctively slowed the truck. The beam of his headlights flickered over something unusual, something crumpled near a snowbank on the right side of the road. At first, he thought it was debris, but then the shape twitched. Logan's heart punched against his ribs. He slammed the brakes, the truck sliding slightly before gripping the icy ground. He threw open the door, and the wind tore into him, biting through his jacket as if it resented his warmth. Snow blasted across his face as he sprinted forward. Shadow leapt out with him, landing silently despite the powdery snow. When Logan reached the figure, he realized it wasn't just a person. It was a young woman collapsing under the storm's wrath. She appeared to be in her late 20s, with light brown hair matted to her forehead, frozen strands clinging to her icy eyelashes. Her face was pale, nearly gray from the cold, and her body trembled uncontrollably. She wore a faded winter coat that was far too thin for the storm, the fabric torn in several spots as if she had been running through dense forest. Beside her, half buried in snow, was a small backpack. But what struck Logan the most was the empty pant leg pinned neatly at her thigh. She had lost a leg. A surge of protective instinct hit him with the force of a blast wave. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" he shouted, leaning close. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Her eyes fluttered open just long enough for Logan to see the terror behind them. Terror not born solely from the cold. Something, or someone, had driven her into this storm. Logan didn't hesitate. He slid his arms beneath her fragile frame. She was far too light, as if hardship had already eaten away at her before the storm ever touched her. As he lifted her, her head fell against his chest, and he felt the faintest breath brush through her cracked lips. Shadow circled them protectively, barking once into the wind as though warning the storm itself to back off. "We've got you," Logan whispered, lowering his voice to something softer than he had used in years. "Hang on." He carried her toward the truck with urgency sharpened by years of battlefield triage. She was freezing fast, dangerously fast. Her skin was cold through her clothing, and her hands were stiff, fingers curled as though they had tried to grip survival but lost the strength. Logan knew hypothermia when he saw it. Without intervention, she wouldn't last even half an hour. Shadow jumped back into his seat as Logan placed the woman carefully across the back seat of the truck, brushing snow off her face and tucking his own jacket over her trembling body. He checked her pulse, weak but present. That gave him a sliver of hope. Shadow moved closer, resting his body beside her in a protective stance, his warmth radiating into her chilled form. As Logan climbed back into the driver's seat, he stole another look at the mysterious woman. Who was she? Why was she alone in a storm that could kill even experienced mountaineers? And what had happened to her leg? Her prosthetic was nowhere in sight. The empty pant leg seemed to tell a deeper story. Logan felt a pang of something unexpected, a fierce resolve not just to save her life, but to understand the fear in her half-frozen eyes. He turned the truck around, directing it toward his cabin higher up the mountain, where he knew he had blankets, heat, and medical supplies. His hands gripped the wheel with renewed intensity. The storm seemed even angrier now, as if challenging his decision to intervene. But Logan was used to facing forces stronger than himself, and something in him, something buried deep beneath the discipline and scars, reacted to this woman's suffering with a protective fire he hadn't felt in years. As the truck pushed forward, Logan spoke softly to Shadow. "Stay alert. We don't know what drove her out here." Shadow gave a low rumble, eyes fixed on the woman with a mixture of concern and readiness. Logan trusted that instinct. Shadow had sensed ambushes, explosives, and danger long before Logan ever saw them. If the dog remained on edge, it meant this situation was far from ordinary. The woman stirred faintly, mumbling something incoherent. Logan leaned back slightly to listen, but could only catch fragments lost to the storm. Her brow furrowed, and a tear escaped beneath the frost clinging to her lashes. Something inside Logan twisted. She was afraid, deeply afraid, and fear that strong was rarely without cause. The memory of a teammate's final words flashed through Logan's mind, a regret he carried like a bullet still lodged inside him. "If you ever get the chance to save someone, Logan, don't hesitate." The storm outside roared, but inside the truck, Logan felt a stillness, a clarity. He wouldn't fail this time. Not again. Shadow shifted, nudging the woman's hand with his nose. It was a gesture Logan had watched Shadow use with wounded soldiers overseas, a grounding reminder that they weren't alone. Even unconscious, the woman's fingers twitched slightly as if trying to curl into Shadow's fur. Logan exhaled, his breath fogging the freezing air. "You're safe now," he murmured. "Nothing's going to happen to you tonight." But as the truck climbed toward the cabin, Logan couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them from the forest's edge. He scanned the tree line through the storm, catching only glimpses of dark shapes shifting between the pines. It could have been the wind, the branches weighed down by snow, or something else entirely. The storm howled louder, pushing at the truck like a living creature. But inside the cab, amid the swirling chaos outside, a new determination settled into Logan's chest. Whatever danger this young woman had faced, whatever terror had driven her into the blizzard, he would stand between her and the world, and Shadow would stand beside him, ready as always. As the pickup finally turned onto the narrow path leading toward the cabin, Logan glanced one more time at the woman whose fate had collided so violently with his. Her breathing had steadied a little, thanks to the warmth. Her face, though still pale, seemed less lifeless than before. She was fighting, clinging to whatever thread of life she could. Logan respected fighters. Shadow barked once, softly, as if acknowledging her resilience too. The cabin's porch light flickered in the distance, a fragile beacon against the storm. Logan pressed forward. Whatever story this woman carried, whatever danger shadowed her steps, this night was only the beginning. And Logan Ward had just stepped willingly into a battle he didn't yet understand. The storm clawed at the walls of Logan Ward's cabin, as if trying to tear its way inside. But within the wooden walls, the fire he had quickly built was beginning to spread warm light across the dim room. Smoke curled gently toward the chimney, and the scent of burning pine filled the air. Logan had moved with the precision of a man trained to act under pressure. Kindling placed just right, blankets layered, water warmed. He worked with a focus so intense it almost hid the tension flickering behind his gray eyes. Shadow, the disciplined German shepherd who had stood beside him through fire, ice, and battlefields far from home, curled close to Mira Dawson now. The dog's thick coat radiated heat as he pressed his flank gently against her single remaining leg. Every few seconds, Shadow released a soft whine, nudging his muzzle toward her knee or her trembling hands, urging her to stay awake. His instincts, honed through years of K9 special operations training, recognized the unmistakable signs of a person slipping toward danger. Mira Dawson lay on the worn but sturdy couch near the fireplace. In the glow of the flames, her features were more visible now. She was a slender woman in her late 20s, her build naturally petite, perhaps 5'4" when standing. Her light brown hair, long and tangled from wind and snow, clung in damp strands against her pale cheeks. Her complexion was fair but bruised by cold, the blue tint along her lips slowly fading as warmth returned. Logan noticed faint freckles across the bridge of her nose, a detail that somehow made her appear even younger, too young for the terror she had carried into the storm. Her eyes, when they fluttered open, were a deep hazel, rimmed with red from the cold and from something older, something heavier than a winter storm. This woman had endured hardship long before he found her on that road. As Mira blinked against the firelight, her eyes welled with tears. Her voice cracked when she spoke. I didn't think anyone would find me." The words were simple, but the tremor in her voice revealed layers of fear and hopelessness. Logan felt them as if they weighed against his chest. He had rescued civilians before, too many times in situations where he hadn't been able to save everyone. But this time, he had arrived in time. That mattered. He crouched beside the couch, placing a warm metal cup of water into her shaking hands. "Drink slowly," he said, his voice steady but softer than usual. Logan seldom allowed himself gentleness, but tonight, something about this woman, the fragility in her breath, the resilience in her eyes, invited it from him. She obeyed, pressing the rim to her lips, the water trembling just as much as her fingers. Once she drank enough to steady herself, Logan lifted a thick wool blanket and draped it over her shoulders. She sank into it, breathing out a broken, relieved sigh. Shadow rested his head on her lap, closing his eyes, but each staying fully alert, ready for danger at the slightest shift. Logan finally spoke the questions circling in his mind since he found her in the snow. "What were you doing out there in that storm?" His tone was calm, not demanding, but edged with urgency. He needed answers, not for curiosity, but for safety. Something about her fear didn't feel random. Mira stared into the fire, her hazel eyes reflecting flames that looked too much like memories she had tried to outrun. She swallowed hard, her throat tightening. Her hands trembled more violently now, not from the cold, but from memory. "I saw something I shouldn't have," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Men, moving crates in the forest. They chased me. I thought I could hide in the mountains." Her breath hitched, and she pressed the blanket tighter around herself. "They weren't supposed to see me. I wasn't supposed to be there." Logan's jaw tightened. He had seen this kind of terror before, the kind that came not from nature, but from people who believed they owned the night. He didn't yet know what those crates contained, but he knew the look of someone hunted. Mira's eyes carried that same hunted look, etched deep. Shadow stiffened immediately, his ears rising, his muscles tensing beneath his coat. Logan noticed it. The dog's instincts rarely misjudged a threat. "Did they follow you?" Logan asked, already adjusting the tactical lines in his mind. Possible escape routes, defensive positions in and outside the cabin, how to position Mira if things escalated. Mira blinked, tears spilling. I don't know. I ran when they saw me. They had flashlights. I heard them yelling, but the storm hid me. I just kept moving. I didn't know which way I was going. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I thought the cold would kill me before they did. Fear radiated off her in waves, a deeper fear than mere survival. Logan recognized that fear intimately, because he had lived it in deserts and jungles far from home. Fear of being pursued, fear of being outnumbered, fear of being forgotten. He stood and walked toward a wooden cabinet, taking out a medical kit. As he prepared disinfectant, bandages, and ointment, Logan forced himself to breathe steadily. He needed clarity. He couldn't afford anger or impulse, not now. But anger was there, smoldering beneath the discipline. Anger toward whoever had driven Mira into the jaws of a blizzard. When he returned to her side, Logan spoke with clinical precision. "I need to check you for frostbite." Mira nodded weakly, allowing him to inspect her hands, her face, her remaining leg. Logan treated her fingers with gentle but practiced movements. Her skin was cold but recovering. He had gotten to her just in time. He moved to her injured pant leg, noticing how the fabric had been tied neatly to prevent cold from entering. She had enough presence of mind to secure it, even while terrified and freezing. That alone spoke to her resilience. As Logan worked, Mira watched him with an expression torn between gratitude and disbelief. She saw more than just a rescuer. She saw a man carved from hardship. Logan's face was rugged, with strong cheekbones and a squared jaw softened only by his stubble. His eyes, though hardened by discipline, held a depth that suggested he understood pain, not in theory, but in memory. She wondered what ghosts lived behind those eyes. She wondered whether helping her would awaken them. Logan finished bandaging her hands and pulled the blanket securely around her. "You're safe here," he said quietly, though the tension in his shoulders betrayed the full truth. She was safe for now. Mira leaned back, her breathing steadier. "Thank you," she murmured. "I don't know your name." "Logan," he replied. "Logan Ward." She absorbed the name slowly, as if anchoring herself to it. "And this is Shadow," Logan added, resting a hand atop the dog's head. Shadow lifted his gaze proudly, ears perked, chest rising with a steady breath. "Shadow," Mira smiled faintly, her voice warming for the first time. He stayed with me, even in the truck, like he knew I needed him." "He did," Logan said. "He's trained to sense distress, and he never leaves someone who needs him." Shadow wagged his tail once, as if confirming the statement. Mira's eyes drifted back to the fire. "I didn't mean to get involved in anything dangerous," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was just taking a shortcut through the forest. I've hiked there my whole life, but tonight I saw lights, and the crates, and the men. They were arguing. One of them shoved another. I think they were smuggling something, and when I stepped on a branch, just one stupid branch, they heard me." Her breath trembled. "They shouted. They ran after me. I couldn't go home. I didn't know where else to go." Logan absorbed every detail, storing them with soldierly precision. His mind pieced together possibilities. Illegal operations, dangerous individuals, men willing to kill to keep secrets buried. Mira had stumbled into something far worse than she understood. "Did you recognize any of them?" Logan asked. He kept his tone level, not wanting to overwhelm her. "No," she said, "but one of them, he had a scar." She lifted a shaking hand toward her cheek, tracing a line down from her eye to her jaw. "Like this. Deep. I saw it when he pointed the flashlight at me." Logan noted it silently. Men with scars from violence often had histories that matched the wounds. Mira pressed her face into her hands. "I didn't know where to run. I thought maybe if I reached the fire lookout tower, someone would find me. But the storm came so fast." Her voice cracked again. "I lost my prosthetic when I tripped. I tried crawling. The wind was so strong, I couldn't breathe. I really thought that was it." Logan felt something hard twist in his chest. Not pity. He knew better than to insult someone's strength by pitying them. What he felt was the heavy ache of human injustice. This woman had fought harder with one leg in a blizzard than many full-bodied soldiers would have. "You survived," Logan said gently. "You kept moving. That takes more strength than most people ever know." Mira lowered her hands, tears slipping again. But this time, they weren't just from fear. They were from the shock of being seen. Shadow nudged her hand, and Mira let her fingers sink into his fur, absorbing comfort she didn't realize she needed. Suddenly, Logan's posture changed. His muscles tightened. His eyes cut toward the window. Shadow rose instantly, ears erect, body tense. Something outside shifted. Logan moved silently to the window, parting the curtain by only a fraction. Snow whipped through the air, but beyond the storm's rage, Logan thought he saw movement between the trees. Figures, shadows, or just branches weighed down by ice? He couldn't be sure. But Shadow's growl, low, vibrating, primal, told him enough. Danger wasn't coming. Danger was already here. Night settled over the Ridgepoint Mountains like a heavy shroud, the kind of darkness that devoured sound and swallowed distance. The storm had eased, but the cold remained sharp and unforgiving, seeping through every gap in the wood of the cabin. The fire crackled low in the hearth, casting long, wavering shadows across the floorboards. Logan Ward sat in a wooden chair near the dying fire, not asleep, but resting in the way only a soldier trained to survive long deployments could. His breathing slow, his posture relaxed but never vulnerable. One hand resting unconsciously near the knife sheathed at his hip. His lean, powerful frame looked carved by discipline. The muscles beneath his shirt coiled like dormant machinery that could activate at the slightest threat. Shadow lay by his boots at first, but sometime deep into the night, he rose abruptly, stiffening as if struck by a signal only he could interpret. A low growl vibrated through the dog's chest, deeper and more primal than anything Logan had heard from him in a long time. Logan's eyes snapped open instantly, alert within a heartbeat. Shadow rarely growled unless he sensed something unmistakably dangerous, something alive, deliberate, and close. Logan rose without a sound, his movements smooth, controlled, the reflexes of a man who had spent years navigating darkness in foreign territories. His hand hovered near the cabin's old hunting rifle hanging by the door, but he knew better than to make assumptions. First, he needed eyes on the situation. He stepped silently to the nearest window, pulling the curtain a fraction of an inch. His breath caught, not in fear, but in recognition. In the thin moonlight that managed to break through the storm clouds, he saw movement among the tree line, silhouettes, 3, maybe 4. The figures wore dark clothing, blending with the shadows, but Logan could see enough to understand their intent. These were not hikers, not lost travelers. These were men hunting something, or someone. They had tracked Mira. Logan's jaw clenched, the muscles tightening along his scarred cheek. He had feared this moment the second she mentioned the crates. Fear was not the right word. Anticipation was. He had known danger would come eventually, but he had hoped it wouldn't be this soon. The men moved with purpose, keeping low, scanning the ground, checking the cabin's perimeter. They were following prints, the deep tracks Logan had made when he carried Mira. Even though the snow had covered most of the trail, these men were skilled enough to read curvature, depressions, and wind patterns. They weren't amateurs, which meant they wouldn't stop until they confirmed Mira's fate. Logan turned, his voice low but firm. "Mira!" She startled awake on the couch, disoriented at first, but one look at Logan's expression made her pulse quicken. Her hazel eyes darted to Shadow, who was staring at her intensely, urging movement. "They're here," Logan said, not wasting time. "We need to move now." Mira struggled to pull herself upright, her hands shaking. Her missing leg made every shift of weight an effort, but adrenaline and terror helped her push through the pain. Logan crossed the room in 2 strides, lifting her gently but efficiently. "Where are we going?" she whispered, panic rising. "Somewhere they won't look first," Logan replied. He carried her toward the far corner of the cabin, where a thick rug lay beneath a heavy wooden desk. Logan dragged the desk aside with one arm, revealing a metal ring embedded in the floorboards. He gripped the ring and pulled upward, revealing a square wooden hatch, the entrance to a storm cellar he had built himself, reinforced and hidden beneath layers of insulation. The cellar wasn't large, but it was secure, built for emergencies, stocked with water, blankets, and a battery-powered lantern. Logan lowered Mira inside, careful not to jar her injured limbs. "Stay quiet," he said. "No matter what you hear." Mira grabbed his wrist, her small hand trembling against his calloused skin. "Logan, please be careful." His eyes softened for a brief moment, a fleeting expression almost lost in the tension. "I'm always careful." He shut the hatch, moving the rug and desk back into place with swift precision. The cabin fell into a loaded silence. Shadow positioned himself beside Logan near the front door. The dog was a statue of readiness, muscles taut beneath his thick coat, ears pricked forward, amber eyes glowing in the dim light. His tail was stiff, his body leaning slightly forward, prepared to strike. Logan glanced down at him. "With me," he whispered. Shadow responded with a single silent nod of his head, the kind of understanding that came only from years of working side by side under gunfire. The first impact against the door came hard, splintering wood. Logan inhaled sharply, grounding himself. His mindset shifted into combat mode. Calm, focused, cold. He reached the rifle and positioned himself a few feet from the door. The second impact shattered the lock. The door burst open as three men stormed inside, their boots slamming against the wooden floor. The first intruder, tall and broad-shouldered with a thick beard and a shaved head, scanned the room with a pistol raised. His eyes were small and aggressive, the kind of man hardened by criminal work. The second man, thinner but wiry, had sharp features and nervous movements. His jaw was covered in patchy stubble, and he gripped a hunting knife with white knuckles. The third, somewhere behind them, remained partially obscured, but none of them expected a Navy SEAL. Logan moved like a controlled explosion. With a swift pivot, he slammed the butt of the rifle into the bearded man's jaw, sending him crashing into the wall. Before the wiry man could react, Shadow lunged with lethal precision, the dog's teeth clamped around the man's arm, dragging him to the floor in a flurry of snarls and thrashing limbs. The man screamed, his knife clattering to the ground as Shadow dug deeper, refusing to let go until Logan commanded otherwise. The third man entered just in time to see Logan disarm the first and deliver a crushing elbow strike to his throat. Panic widened the third man's eyes. Unlike his companions, he had enough instinct for self-preservation to run. He fled back into the storm, slipping on the icy porch as he scrambled into the darkness. Shadow released the second man only when Logan ordered, and the wounded intruder collapsed, clutching his bleeding arm. Blood streaked the floorboards. The cabin smelled of sweat, wood smoke, and iron. Logan stood between the attackers and the hidden cellar, chest rising steadily but not rapidly, his breathing controlled, practiced. His knuckles were bruised, a superficial cut above his eyebrow trickled blood down the side of his face, but he barely noticed. He was trained for worse. The bearded man coughed on the floor, struggling to breathe. Logan grabbed him by the collar and pressed him against the wall. "Why are you here?" His voice was low, calm, more terrifying than if he had shouted. The man spat blood, defiance flickering briefly before fading. "The girl," he wheezed. "She saw too much." Logan's grip tightened. "Who sent you?" The man choked. "Not my call." Logan studied the man's face, the fear, the desperation. He realized pressing further was pointless. These were foot soldiers, hired, expendable. A low moan came from the injured man Shadow had taken down. Logan turned, eyes sharp. "Shadow, watch him." The dog obeyed instantly, stepping over the bleeding man, keeping his teeth bared. Logan stepped back, trying to assess the bigger picture. The third man was gone, running back to his leaders, no doubt. The storm was thinning. Tracks would be easy to follow in the morning. They had only bought time, not safety. Logan dragged both conscious intruders outside, binding their hands with rope stored near the cabin door. He left them in the snow where the cold would keep them immobilized but not dead. He wasn't a murderer, but he wasn't about to let them roam free either. Inside again, Logan exhaled slowly, rolling his shoulders to ease the tension. Shadow trotted beside him, ears still alert. "Good boy," Logan murmured, scratching behind Shadow's ear. But even as he praised him, Logan's gaze drifted toward the hidden hatch. Mira had heard the chaos. The moment he lifted the hatch, her wide eyes searched his face, checking for injury. Logan helped her out carefully. She clung to his arm, trembling from fear, not cold this time. "Is it over?" she whispered. Logan shook his head. "No." His eyes cut to the broken door. "But we're leaving at first light." Mira swallowed hard. "Where will we go?" Logan looked into the storm, his jaw set with iron resolve. Somewhere they can't corner us. Somewhere I can protect you better than in an old cabin." He turned to her, his expression firm. "Tomorrow, we move." Before the first hint of sunrise touched the jagged silhouette of the Ridgepoint Mountains, Logan Ward was already moving through the cabin with disciplined efficiency. The air inside was cold again. The fire had died down to glowing embers, and each breath formed a faint cloud in the dim light. Yet Logan's body moved as if warmed by an internal engine, built from years of military conditioning. His broad shoulders cut through the gloom as he zipped up Mira's borrowed winter coat, checked the pockets for thermal packs, and tightened her scarf. Mira Dawson, pale but determined, tried to assist where she could, though she still felt the lingering weakness of the night's terror. Her hazel eyes watched Logan closely, studying the calm precision with which he worked. She knew he was tired. She saw it in the faint shadows beneath his gray eyes, but he never once let his guard slip. That, she realized, was the difference between surviving danger and being consumed by it. Shadow trotted between them, tail stiff but alert, his thick black and tan coat blending into the pre-dawn darkness. His breath puffed in quick bursts, not from exhaustion, but from heightened readiness. At 5 years old, Shadow moved with the instinctual grace of a predator and the discipline of a soldier. Every sense was sharpened, every step measured. He occasionally nudged Logan's leg, as if reminding him they were not alone in this fight. Logan slung a small backpack over one shoulder, filled with emergency supplies. Thermal blankets, protein bars, rope, flare gun, a field knife, and a compact first aid kit. He checked the window overlooking the front of the cabin. The bodies of the 2 restrained intruders remained exactly where he left them, half frozen, their hands bound, their faces slack with unconsciousness. The snowstorm had preserved them like grim sculptures. Logan felt no remorse. They would live, but they would not be waking soon. Mira looked toward the door, her breath shaky. "Will they come back?" she whispered. Logan nodded once. "Yes, and they'll come stronger. Which is why we're leaving now." His tone was softened only slightly for her sake. Mira sensed the layer beneath. Urgency, strategy, and a promise unspoken. She pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders and held onto Shadow's harness for balance. Her missing leg made everything harder, every movement more deliberate, but she refused to be a burden. She straightened her back, even as the cold seeped into her bones. Logan opened the back door of the cabin and ushered her outside. The world beyond was breathtaking in its brutality. The storm had calmed, but the snow lay thick and untouched, forming drifts that sparkled beneath the faintest suggestion of dawn. The forest was silent except for the distant groan of shifting branches weighed down by ice. "We can't take the main road," Logan said quietly. "They'll anticipate that. They'll have scouts, waiting." "Then how do we leave?" Mira asked, gripping Shadow more tightly. Logan pointed through the trees. "We cross Timberfall River." Mira's eyes widened. "But the ice—" "I know." Logan's jaw tightened. "It's thin, but it's our only chance. Once we cross, we'll be on the South Ridge, and from there, we can get to Haven Creek without being seen." Mira swallowed hard. Her fear was visible in the trembling of her jaw, the tightening of her grip on Shadow's harness, but she nodded. She trusted Logan, not blindly, but because he had earned it. They began the trek through the snow-covered forest, the terrain growing more uneven as they descended toward the riverbank. Logan walked in front, carving a path through the thick snow with his boots, while Shadow stayed close to Mira, occasionally circling back to check for threats. The cold stung their faces, and Mira's breath came in short bursts, but Logan adjusted his pace to keep her from collapsing. As they reached the river, the sky lightened to a muted blue. Timberfall River stretched before them, wide, silent, and coated in a thin sheet of ice that shifted and groaned beneath the weight of winter. Patches of black water peeked through cracks near the edges, reflecting the fragile morning light. It was beautiful in a deadly way. Mira's heart clenched. "Logan, I don't know if I can—" "You can," he said gently but firmly. "I'll be right beside you." Shadow stepped onto the first section of ice with careful precision, testing each patch with his weight. Logan followed, his boots making dull thuds on the fragile surface. He extended a hand toward Mira. She took it, her smaller fingers curling tightly around his strong, calloused palm. He supported most of her weight, adjusting his center of gravity to compensate for her missing limb. Together, they stepped onto the ice. The river groaned beneath them. Shadow walked ahead, nose snuffling along the cracks, eyes narrowed. His training made him an invaluable guide, but even so, the risk was immense. Logan shifted his weight slowly, never putting full pressure on one spot for too long. He leaned slightly toward Mira to keep her steady. Halfway across, the air changed. A sharp, high-pitched crack sliced through the silence. Mira froze. "Logan! I hear it!" Shadow barked loudly, tail stiff as a rod, ears pricked in alarm. Logan's instinct took over. He wrapped an arm around Mira's waist, pulling her closer as the ice beneath them trembled. A jagged crack spiraled outward from their feet, branching like lightning across the frozen surface. The ice began to split. Shadow leapt backward onto a more stable patch, barking frantically. Mira gasped as the surface shifted beneath her balance faltering. Logan reacted instantly. With one arm, he hoisted her upward, shifting her weight onto his hip as the ice sagged dangerously. Hold on to me," he growled. She clung to his coat with both hands, her breath ragged with terror. The freezing air exploded with a thunderous crack as a massive sheet of ice beneath them gave way, plunging downward into the freezing river. Logan slammed his boot against a still solid ledge of ice, using the momentum to hurl both himself and Mira toward the nearest stable section. His muscles strained under the weight of both their bodies, his fingers digging into the icy surface for grip. Cold water splashed up their legs as the river swallowed the broken sheet behind them. Shadow howled, pacing along the cracking surface until Logan managed to drag Mira entirely onto the safer ice. He pushed her forward, urging her to crawl while he kept low, distributing his weight. "Don't stop," he commanded. Mira, trembling and breathless, obeyed. She crawled on her hands and knee, each movement deliberate, the cold biting into her palms. Logan remained behind her, always between her and the open water. When they reached the riverbank, Shadow lunged forward, grabbing Mira's coat sleeve with his teeth and pulling her onto solid snow. Logan followed, rolling onto the icy ground as he caught his breath. The freezing wind whipped at their faces, but they were safe, for the moment. Mira pressed a shaking hand to Logan's chest. "You saved me... again?" Logan shook his head, his breath still uneven. "No, we saved each other." Their eyes held for a moment, hers filled with gratitude and disbelief, his with determination and something softer he didn't allow himself to name. Shadow nuzzled Mira, whining softly, checking her for injuries. She stroked his fur, offering reassurance. But the danger wasn't gone. As Logan sat up, his instincts sharpened again. Across the river, barely visible through the trees, he saw movement. Dark shapes. Scouts. The fleeing man from last night must have warned the others. They were closing in. But now Logan had the advantage. He was across the river, and they were not. The ice he and Mira had barely survived was now their barrier. And Logan knew the intruders wouldn't risk crossing so soon. He turned to Mira. "We need to keep moving. Haven Creek is a few miles south. Once we reach the outpost, you'll be safe." Mira nodded, her face pale but determined. "I trust you." Logan adjusted his pack, scanned the tree line again, and moved into the forest with Shadow leading the way. The sky brightened slowly behind them, casting soft light on the frozen world. They had survived the river, but Logan knew the hunters wouldn't stop, and the next battle would be even harder. Morning light slowly slipped across the snow-covered valley like a gentle hand smoothing a troubled brow. The world beyond Ridgepoint had awakened calmer than it had been in days, as though nature itself sensed that something dangerous had finally loosened its grip. By the time Logan Ward reached Haven Creek 2 weeks later, the last remnants of winter storms had softened into a pale, glowing quiet. Haven Creek was a small rehabilitation town tucked beneath sprawling mountains, known for its humble charm, crisp, clean air, and a medical center dedicated to physical and trauma recovery. For most people, it was a place to rebuild. For Logan, stepping into its warm lobby felt like stepping into a life he had never allowed himself to imagine. But this morning, he wasn't here for himself. He was here for Mira. The federal investigation had moved quickly. Mira's full testimony, delivered bravely despite her trembling hands, provided everything the authorities needed. She had described the crates, the men, the scarred leader, the threats, and the location of the hidden clearing. Logan, too, had contributed his strategic knowledge, sketching out a map of the forest clearing and explaining the way the men organized themselves during their pursuit. With this combined information, federal agents launched an operation surrounding the area at dawn. The smuggling ring crumbled within hours. The scarred leader was among those arrested. More arrests followed in the days after, as evidence led to deeper networks. For the first time since that terrifying night, Mira Dawson's life was no longer in danger. She was safe. But safety was not the same as wholeness, and Logan understood that better than most. Mira had survived a blizzard, escaped murder, endured trauma, and faced her own physical vulnerabilities. Safety was only the first step. Healing required more time, more care, more courage. Shadow trotted beside Logan as they walked through the peaceful courtyard outside the Haven Creek Rehabilitation Center. Although older buildings made up most of the campus, each was well kept and surrounded by gardens that would soon bloom when spring arrived. The morning sun painted the landscape in gentle gold, warming crisp patches of melting snow. Shadow sniffed the air curiously, tail swaying with mild anticipation. He knew exactly where they were going. Dogs always remembered the people who mattered. Logan's boots crunched on the gravel path. His tall frame, muscular, strong, and unmistakably military even in civilian clothing, cast a long shadow over the ground. Though he wore a simple dark gray hoodie, worn jeans, and well-used boots, he could never fully soften the aura of discipline that defined him. His posture was too precise, his shoulders too straight, his eyes too watchful. Years of war zones and covert missions had shaped him into a fortress of instinct. But today, that fortress felt strangely open, softer, as though something had cracked the stone around him, allowing sunlight to slip through. He found Mira in the open courtyard behind the main building. She stood tall, taller than he remembered, though she had not physically grown. What had changed was the confidence in her stance. Her long, light brown hair was pulled into a neat ponytail that brushed her shoulders. Her skin held more color now, a soft, healthy glow instead of the drained pallor she had during those frantic nights in the mountains. Her hazel eyes sparkled in the morning light as she concentrated on the parallel bars in front of her. And at the base of those bars was her new prosthetic leg. It was sleek, titanium-framed, fitted to her height and walking pattern. The prosthetic shimmered under the sunlight, reflecting resilience rather than loss. Mira's fingers tightened around the bars as she shifted her weight and took a firm, decisive step. Her balance wavered slightly, but she corrected quickly, jaw set with determination. A nearby physical therapist watched her progress. He was a tall, thin man in his 40s, with sandy blonde hair and kind blue eyes. His name tag read Evan Hall. Logan had met him briefly when he first arrived. Evan had a gentle demeanor, but beneath it Logan sensed a firmness, the kind of strength that came from helping people rebuild their lives for years. He had the posture of someone who cared deeply about his patients, and the way he kept his hands near Mira, not touching her unless needed, showed respect for her independence. Mira took another step, then another. Shadow could no longer contain himself. With a sharp, excited bark, he bounded forward. Mira startled, then laughed, a sound so full and pure that Logan felt it echo through him like a warm breeze after a long winter. "Shadow!" she exclaimed, gripping the bars as the dog circled around her, tail wagging wildly. She bent slightly to ruffle his fur, nearly losing her balance as Shadow enthusiastically nudged his head against her knee. Evan steadied her until she regained her footing. Logan approached slowly, unable to hide the faint smile pulling at the corner of his mouth. Seeing her upright, strong, determined, glowing with life, filled him with a comfort he had not realized he needed. He stopped a few feet away, hands in his pockets. "You're looking good," he said softly. Mira turned to him fully, her smile widening. "Logan." His name slipped from her lips as naturally as a breath. "I didn't think you'd come so soon." He shrugged lightly, though there was warmth behind his eyes. Shadow insisted. Shadow barked proudly, trotting between the two of them, as if ensuring they stayed close. Mira laughed again, a sound that wrapped itself around Logan's chest and melted the last remnants of distance he kept between himself and the world. Evan stepped back politely. "I'll give you both a moment," he said, nodding before walking toward another patient near the benches. His height and long strides were noticeable even from afar, and his friendly demeanor made him blend easily into the supportive atmosphere of Haven Creek. Logan moved closer to Mira, watching the subtle shift of weight as she practiced balancing on her prosthetic leg. "How does it feel?" he asked. Mira glanced down at it fondly. "Like a future I didn't know I could still have." She looked up again, eyes shimmering. "When they fitted it last week, I cried, not because it hurt, but because I didn't think I would ever stand, really stand, on my own again." "You're stronger than you think," Logan murmured. She tilted her head. "You said that before. You proved me right." A silence settled between them, not awkward, not heavy, but warm. The kind of silence shared between people who had carried each other through darkness and now stood in light. Shadow sat at Mira's side, chest puffed out, as if he had personally crafted her prosthetic leg with his paws. Mira bent and scratched his neck. "You kept me alive, didn't you?" she said gently. "More than once." Shadow licked her hand in reply. Logan rubbed the back of his neck, a gesture that betrayed the nerves he rarely allowed to show. "Mira, there's something I wanted to say, something I've been thinking about since that night." She straightened, leaning lightly against the bars for balance. "What is it?" He took a slow breath. "You've been through hell, and you came out the other side standing taller than before. I wanted to tell you, if you ever need a place to start again—" His voice dropped, turning warmer, more vulnerable than he intended. "Shadow and I would be honored to walk that road with you." Mira's eyes widened, not with surprise, she had hoped for these words, but with tenderness. The wind brushed through her ponytail, lifting strands of hair into the sunlight. "Logan," she whispered, her voice trembling the way hearts tremble when walls finally break. "Then don't walk away." The words hit him like a soft blow, unexpected, powerful, healing. Shadow barked once, sharp, bright, triumphant, as though he approved entirely. Logan chuckled under his breath, running a hand through the dog's fur. "Traitor," he murmured affectionately, though he knew the truth. Shadow had known long before he did. Mira stepped forward, shifting her weight with newfound confidence. She reached out, and Logan reached back, their hands meeting in the space between what had been fear and what now blossomed into hope. The sun rose fully over Haven Creek then, bathing them in warm gold. It caught the metal of Mira's prosthetic shin, the shine of Shadow's coat, and the quiet softness in Logan's guarded eyes. It lit up their silhouettes like a blessing, a beginning, not one born from perfect circumstances, but from storms. Survived, fears confronted, and a shared belief that broken roads can still lead to beautiful places. Logan squeezed Mira's hand gently. She lifted her chin, smiling, not just with relief, but with courage. Shadow circled them again, tail a blur of joy. And together, beneath the morning sun, the three of them took the first step toward whatever waited on the horizon. Sometimes the greatest miracles don't arrive with thunder or bright lights. Sometimes they come in the quiet moments, in a stranger who refuses to leave you behind, in a loyal dog who senses your pain, in the courage to take one more step even when you feel broken. Logan, Mira, and Shadow remind us that no matter how dark the storm gets, God never lets us walk through it alone. He sends strength in unexpected forms, a helping hand, a gentle voice, a sunrise after a long night of fear. And in our everyday lives, we can be that miracle for someone else. A smile, a kind word, a small act of compassion. Those things might save a life in ways we may never fully realize. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment, let us know your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel so more stories of courage, healing, and faith can reach those who need them most. May God bless you, protect your home, and guide your steps, just as He guided theirs through the storm. Amen.